system has to be changed.
I'm replaying this. This happened today. I wanted you guys to see what's in store for the world.
Serve our people.
And what's
Here we
the meaning
go.
of life? Why are we here? What's it all about?
The world is moving backwards. Climate change crisis.
Let's work together.
New industrial revolution.
The whole system has to be changed.
تنظر الحكومة المتميزة إلى أن كل مواطن ثروة وطنية، وبناء الدولة لا يعتمد على الحكومة فقط، بل هو واجب على كل مواطن.
ما في خط نهائي للتطور والابتكار والتميز.
Let's make sure that every single government department can be as good as the best private company in the world.
When we meet for the 20th Governance Summit, you will use an app like Uber, but not anymore to call some driver, but a self-driven car. We will pay, not necessarily with bitcoins, but with other, what they call cryptocurrencies.
Our countries can learn from each other. We can make our governments even more responsive and accountable to our citizens.
We face a terrible lack of trust between peoples and government, and lots of people that feel that they were left behind and that their countries have not taken care of them.
We need to just be very careful in how we adopt artificial intelligence.
I'd like to see a future where all the countries of the world, no matter how poor or wealthy you are, you say 10% is going to be.
A devastating epidemic can start in any country at any time and kill millions of people because we're not prepared, because we're still vulnerable.
We are faced with what I believe is the greatest moral crisis of our time, that those least responsible for nature's destruction will suffer the greatest consequences. The problems are global. The solutions must be global.
We need to make sure that every child is back in the classroom and learning, and we need to invest in teachers.
I think what we're realizing more and more is the power of the creative arts and storytelling.
We do know that the greatest force of evolution through human inventiveness and technology. So we are at the brink of a new world in which the technologies are going to radically change a lot of the things that we know, but we don't know how.
It is our job to create computing technology such that nobody has to program, and that the programming language is human.
اليوم أستطيع أن أقول بأننا انتقلنا إلى الثانية من الدقيقة الأولى، من الساعة الأولى، من اليوم الأول من التطور التكنولوجي مع الاستخدام الكبير للذكاء الاصطناعي.
القمة العالمية للحكومات.
World Government Summit. World Governance Summit ini. Hükümet zirvesinin insanlık.
The World Government Summit.
أصحاب المعالي والسعادة، أيها الحضور الكريم، تنطلق الآن أعمال اليوم الأول للقمة العالمية للحكومات 2025. نرحب بكل من معالي محمد القرقاوي، وزير شؤون مجلس الوزراء في دولة الإمارات العربية المتحدة ورئيس القمة العالمية للحكومات، ليلقي الكلمة الافتتاحية، والبروفيسور كلاوس شواب، رئيس مجلس الأمناء للمنتدى الاقتصادي العالمي، ليلقي كلمة بعنوان الحكومات في عصر الذكاء الاصطناعي.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, welcome to the first day of the World Government Summit 2025. We start our day with an opening speech by His Excellency Mohammed Al-Gargawi, UAE Minister of Cabinet Affairs and Chairman of the World Government Summit, followed by a session titled Governments in the Intelligent Age with Professor Klaus Schwab, Chairman of the Board of Trustees of the World Economic Forum. Please note that the opening speech will be in Arabic. Kindly use your headsets for instant interpretation.
صباح الخير السيدات والسادة أصحاب المعالي، صديقي البروفيسور كلاوس شواب، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أرحب بكم في القمة العالمية للحكومات، والتي تنطلق بتوجيهات من صاحب السمو الشيخ محمد بن زايد آل نهيان رئيس الدولة حفظه الله، يعانون من الاكتئاب حول العالم. الاقتصاد العالمي يتكبد تريليون دولار. يعلمنا إياه التاريخ أن القادم مختلف عن السابق، والمتغيرات الاقتصادية والتقنية ستكون أيضاً مختلفة بشكل كامل. دور الحكومات أن تستعد لذلك، لأن ما سيأتي هو تاريخ جديد وسيكتب بقواعد جديدة. وفي الختام، تمنياتي لكم بقمة تصنع واقعاً أفضل لل25 سنة القادمة، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. والآن أدعو صديقي البروفيسور كلاوس شواب، مؤسس ورئيس مجلس الأمناء في المنتدى الاقتصادي العالمي، لإلقاء كلمته. بروفيسور.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Minister, since we opened this meeting, the first meeting 12 years ago, I think, the world has changed so much. But I have to say, you were always at the forefront of this change. Now, ladies and gentlemen, just think you were living 200 years back. It was the agricultural age. And then we had the first industrial revolution, with the invention of the steam engine, the second industrial revolution with mass production, electricity, the third industrial revolution with computers, and then the fourth industrial revolution. And I remember I spoke about the fourth industrial revolution when we opened this meeting in 2016. And now, it's much more than just an industrial revolution. Similar to the transition from the agricultural age to the industrial age, we are now moving from the industrial age to the intelligent age. But there is one big difference compared to the first transition from the agricultural to the industrial age, where we had several generations to adapt. Now, this transition is happening at exponential speed. Everybody speaks about artificial intelligence, but just imagine what progress has been made just in the last 3 years. Now again, this country has been very foresighted. I think, Minister, you have since 2017 a Minister for Artificial Intelligence. So we are living in the transition to a new time, which will change everything. It will change how we communicate, how we work, how we live. In the agricultural age, the economy was mainly based on agricultural products. In the industrial age, industrial products and services, more and more sophisticated. But now in this new age, the base will be knowledge, data, and intelligent insights. What does it mean for governments? Governments have to be enablers of this change at lightning speed. They have to provide the necessary infrastructure. And they have particularly to cooperate with business, because this transition into this new intelligent age will only be mastered if all stakeholders of global society work together. Governments in the lead, business as the innovators, and of course civil society, making sure that this transformation is benefiting everybody. But governments have another big task and challenge: to produce, to help to produce the talents which we need to shape the intelligent age. Our capabilities, our knowledge base has to change tremendously in order to be competitive in this new world. Minister, you referred to education. Education will be the key. Now, what we have to expect, according to the research of my organization, is that 50% of jobs will be directly or indirectly affected already in the next 5 to 10 years by this revolution. But there's a third big role which governments have to play. Governments have to work together to create the necessary guardrails, the necessary ethical policies around those new technologies. They can serve for the benefit of humankind, but they can also do a lot of harm. What we are seeing today in the international efforts is not enough. Of course, my own organization is very much involved in creating the necessary understanding, but also the necessary to help the necessary policies around those new technologies. And it's not just artificial intelligence, it's also quantum computing, crypto, and so on. But we need more efforts, not just summits from time to time. We need a coordinated global process to make sure that those technologies are to the benefit of humankind, of everybody. Now, if we look at the future, Minister, you mentioned the lack of trust. Yes, if we look at the future, many people are afraid because the progress is so fast, so complex. Can we understand? I have to confess, even writing at the moment a book on the intelligent age, I don't understand all the aspects. So what is the consequence of not understanding? It's being afraid of the future. So governments have also the task to explain to the people, to be educators, to show them that actually those technologies have more opportunities than they entail threats. Now, the future is not happening. The future is shaped by us. The future is shaped particularly, and has to be shaped, through cooperation and collaborative efforts between governments, business, and civil society. The worst what could happen is not just we lose trust into governments or business. The worst what could happen is that we lose trust in our future. And the future is not happening. The future is shaped by us, as I mentioned. So let's look with optimism into the future. And as I said in Davos just 2 weeks ago, let's look at our future with constructive optimism. Thank you.
I think they are giving us the music, so we'll have time for one question. I'll try to make it two. Should AI be treated like nuclear technology, requiring strict global governance?
No, AI is an enabling, it's a systemic technology. So it penetrates everything what we are doing. So governments have a big responsibility, particularly also, as I mentioned, in shaping the necessary norms and rules. And I would say in the past, very often we spoke about government officials as being bureaucrats. I would coin a new expression. Government people today have to be governance architects. They have to create the frameworks. They have to have systems thinking. It's not anymore possible to look just at one element of the picture. What we need is a systems approach. And I think governments are very essential in defining the system and work with a systems-oriented attitude.
Sure. My second question, Professor, what quality will define successful leader in the intelligent age?
I would say what is very important today for an individual in order to survive and to not only to survive, but to prosper in this new world. I think it is the what I would call curiosity. Because if you are curious of what's happening, it's fascinating. For me, it's fascinating what's happening in the world at the moment. If you are curious, you want to learn. And learning is essential, but there's one difference. We are faced with what I mentioned, exponential speed. And actually, we are wired in a way that we are much more apt to respond to linear speed, to linear change, but not to exponential change. Now, here, artificial intelligence can actually help us very much, because artificial intelligence can provide us with the capability to digest. If I take a pot, it can help me to deal with this very exponential change.
Professor, thank you very much. سادة الحضور، أتمنى لكم 3 أيام من المعرفة والشغف، وبإذن الله نراكم على خير خلال هذه الجلسات. شكرا جزيلا. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you much.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our next session is a conversation titled The Future We Shape with Robin Lee, co-founder and CEO of Baidu, and His Excellency Omar Sultan Al Ulama, UAE Minister of State for Artificial Intelligence, Digital Economy and Remote Work Applications, and Vice Chair of the World Government Summit.
So much to talk about, so little time.
Yeah, it's
Robin,
an
thank
exciting
you so much
time.
for being here.
Right.
So I just want to do a quick introduction on who Robin Lee is and what Baidu is. I think that the world today is a bipolar world in many senses when it comes to artificial intelligence. Most people talk about China and the US. And in that conversation, one of the main pillars of China's AI endeavors is Baidu and the incredible work that they do. So it's great to have Robin Lee's perspective, a leader in this domain, as well as Baidu's perspective on the future of AI. I'd like to start with the elephant in the room, which is DeepSeek.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to specifically ask, was it expected, in your opinion? Like, did you actually think that this is going to happen, it's going to happen this fast and in this way? Or were you caught by surprise as well by what DeepSeek was able to achieve?
Basically, my view is that innovation cannot be planned. You just don't know when and where innovation comes. What you can do is just to foster an environment that is conducive to innovation. We live in a very exciting time. In the past, when we talk about Moore's Law, it's like every 18 months, the performance doubles or the price halves. But today, when we talk about large language models, the inference cost basically can be reduced by more than 90% over 12 months. So this is much, much faster than the computer revolution we experienced over the past few decades. And also, I think LLM is a very large area. There are all kinds of directions that you can innovate on. For example, in the US, the OpenAIs and services, they all race to build or to develop the most powerful large language models. But in China, because of the constraints of compute, we have to innovate to reduce the cost, both on the inference side and the training side. And fortunately, we've seen significant progress in the past year or so. For Baidu, we start from a search engine background. It's naturally very close to large language model. That's why in March of 2023, we launched the ErnieBot, which was our answer to ChatGPT. That's like 3 months after ChatGPT was launched. That's also probably the first ChatGPT-like application ever launched by a public company. And Google launched Bard later, and they renamed it to Gemini, as we know today. So it's a very exciting time. We see innovations everywhere, and we have to adjust ourselves to this kind of fast-changing innovation. But I would say that what's more important is AI application. Over the past few years, we were very excited about all kinds of improvements, technology breakthroughs. But if we look at the technology stack, it's like a pyramid in the sense that the most money is made on the silicon level, the GPUs and other kind of ASIC chips. Then on top of that, it's a cloud infrastructure, the hyperscalers or cloud service providers. And then on top of that, it's a language model. And then the application layer is at the very top. But the applications haven't made much money yet. Today, when we talk about AI native applications, ARR, or annual recurring revenue, it's probably like several 10 million or max several $100 million. But at the GPU level, you talk about tens of billions of dollars.
I think that's what everyone's talking about right now, which is how do you justify the investments?
Mm-hmm.
I want to actually go back to the point that you mentioned. You said that in China, we're actually trying to innovate to reduce the cost. Some people think that this is because of the restrictions on the chips coming to China, because of the political direction.
Yeah.
But if you actually zoom out and look at the history of China, it's done that with every industry.
Mm-hmm.
So in cars, for example, the whole point was to take this industry, to reduce the cost, and to then build new products.
Yeah.
I think it is a way that China actually approaches technology and innovation, reducing the cost, improving the efficiency, and then trying to scale and maybe take over the market in that sense.
Yeah.
So do you think this is because of the chips, or do you think that this is how China typically approaches innovation?
Well, I think most of the innovation, not just in AI or not even just in the IT industry, I think if you look back the past few hundred years, I think most of the innovation relates to cost reduction. If you can reduce the cost by certain amount, certain percentage, then that means your productivity increases by that kind of percentage. So I think that's pretty much the nature of innovation. It's just that today it's happening at a rate much faster than before. And for companies in China, we are under certain type of constraint. So we were probably the first ones to feel the pain of those high cost. I'll give you an example in robotaxi. In the U.S. or in more developed markets, the ride-hailing price is much higher than that in China, right? So even if you have a car, that robotaxi car that costs like, let's say, $100,000, you can still make money by operating that car in a driverless fashion. But in China, the ride-hailing price is much lower. So you have to come out with a technology that costs much less in order to make sense to have a driverless operation. So we, to a certain extent, are forced to innovate to bring down the cost.
If we touch upon maybe Apollo just specifically here, in your opinion, do you think that the driverless car ecosystem in China is more advanced than what it is in the US because the regulations allowed for you to deploy, because you have certain real-life use cases that are cheap, that are cost-effective, that people are using on their day-to-day lives? Or do you think they are equal? Or do you think that, how do you compare it in both countries? If I was a government official that's sitting here in this crowd, and I wanted to choose who to partner with, how would you compare the product? How would you compare the advancement?
Yeah, I would say there are a number of technological approaches for the self-driving thing. Tesla has their own approach. They just don't want to use any sensor other than camera, and they would like to achieve full self-driving from the ADAS or advanced aided, computer-aided driving until you can reach a fully driverless stage. But for us, for our robotaxi is called Apollo Go, and for Waymo, we're taking a different approach. We would like to start from certain geographic areas, and from day one, it's operated without any driver. And I think both approaches has its merit. We just need to move faster. Wherever the regulatory environment allows, we'll just deploy the operation there. Speaking of this, I actually have a video that shows how a robotaxi is operated in China. Let's take a look.
In our city, robotaxi has become a part of life.
Robotaxi.
Self-driving technology.
Let's go.
How does Apollo Go make people enjoy driverless rides? It answers your every call.
So this is Robert. Really quickly, they call it Apollo Go. Apollo Go. Can you believe that? They call their driverless cars driverless car technology Apollo Go. Apollo. What? Apollo Go. It blows my mind. Anyways, there's the Apollo again.
And attends your every need.
The door is closing.
It withstands scrutiny.
Welcome to Apollo Go. Slide the screen and start your trip.
And passes all tests. It is an evolving intelligence. Humbler and safer. It caters to your interests and accompanies your exploration. It alleviates your fatigue and takes you to the destination. Apollo Go, advancing for safety, innovating for lives.
Honestly, I think maybe we should explore next year the government summit, all the fleet to be autonomous, powered by Apollo Go.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, but you can see that the road condition is actually quite complicated, quite challenging, right? Sometimes you're cut through by a car coming from nowhere. There are motorcycles weaving through the traffic, and sometimes you have to overtake a bus in front of you. This is not imagination or some kind of futuristic vision. This is things that happens every day in some of the Chinese cities.
And realistically, if I were to deploy this technology, and I wanted to deploy it in some city, for example, around the world, how long does it take from saying, yes, let's do it, to actually deploying it and seeing it come to reality?
Technically, it takes about 2 weeks. But in order to comply with the local regulations, a typical deployment cycle is about 6 months. Most cities require us to have safety driver and to drive around the road for, I don't know, 1 or 2 months, and then you get rid of the driver, but you cannot charge. Then you can start to charge. Then you can expand the areas from certain dedicated area to the whole city. That process typically takes about 6 months.
So technology readiness is 2 weeks, but regulation readiness takes 6 months. I think this is the reality of most innovation.
Right.
That governments, unfortunately, at most points of time, are not able to remove bureaucracy and red tape fast enough to allow for the technology.
Right.
I'll pivot maybe to another topic of interest, which is the risk of AI. And people that work on the frontier of AI have different views on what AI can do, what it can't do.
Yeah.
Self-driving cars are a very good application of AI.
Right.
That talks about a positive future where people can enjoy their drive and have fun, be more productive.
Yeah.
What keeps you up at night when it comes to artificial intelligence? What are you worried about?
Yeah, I worry a lot of things. First, it's a regulatory environment. Right now, as you know, that technology is already ahead of the regulatory environment. Sometimes I just think, okay, our technology is already ready, but why can't we just deploy it to a much larger scale or much wider region? And secondly, technology is improving very, very fast. Although we are already impressed with what we can achieve today, but think about 6 months from now or 2 years from now, it will become much better. Is that by Baidu or by our peers or by someone from a different industry? We just don't know. Everyone is rushing ahead, and competition is also very fierce. And there are also risks associated with this kind of innovation. Although we have proven that robotaxi is much safer than human drivers, I think it's at least, as of today, it's at least 10 times safer. Every year, more than 1 billion people get killed in traffic accidents. But with robotaxi, that death rate can be reduced significantly. Also, if you look at from the insurance claims, from our operating record, our insurance claims is only like 1/14 of regular taxi or a regular driver car. But still, this is a new industry, a new area. People's tolerance on accidents are very low. So if some serious accident happens, it may drag down your technology progress. You probably have to stop the operation for a certain amount of time and find out what happened and make all the adjustments to restart the operation. So we've been very careful so that as of today, although we've been operating this for like 2-3 years on a relatively large scale, we haven't had any serious accidents involving our robotaxi.
A few weeks ago, when DeepSeek became the talk of town and the world saw what the Chinese were able to achieve with a model that is so effective, so cheap, so easy to deploy, that's open source, the stocks of many of the large chip providers and many of the large data center providers around the world dropped significantly because people thought that we might not need those investments, these eye-watering billions of dollars that are being invested in inferencing data centers, in data centers to train these AI systems and models. Do you actually think that seeing what we see and knowing what you know, that these investments are going to continue, or do you think we're going to have to look back and maybe create a new model where we build as we go, or that we innovate in that faster than we innovate in other industries? How do you see the future of data centers, of infrastructure in this domain?
Yeah, I think this is a great question, and I've been thinking about this for the past month or so. I think when you look at the fundamentals, what the overarching theme is still that the technology improves very fast. The costs are reduced by like 90% every year, and the performance becomes better and better. And when the technology is still evolves at such a rapid rate, you just cannot stop investing. You have to invest to make sure that you are at the very front of this technological innovation or revolution. So I think the investment in silicon, in computer, in cloud infrastructure is still very much required. To come up the next best model, a model that outsmarts everyone else, you have to use more compute to try all kind of different areas. Maybe at some point you find a shortcut that takes, let's say, 6 million to train a model, but you already spend like billions to figure out which way is the right way to spend like 6 million, right?
But isn't that the gambler's dilemma? I've already spent 100 and I need to take something back, so I keep spending to hopefully make back that money and beyond.
Right.
And who's going to win? You said earlier, I think this is a great point that you mentioned. The returns of these models and deploying these models economically don't make sense currently.
Right.
So is the view that at one point of time we'll be able to make the returns to justify it?
Yeah.
Is the view that maybe my model is going to be the one that's used and I'm going to win that game and make up for it?
Yeah.
What do you think the approach is?
I'm optimistic about the future of AI. I think even at the current level, large language models can already create a lot of value in all kinds of scenarios. We have like hundreds of thousands of customers who use the early large language model to improve the efficiency in areas like recruitment, e-commerce, or healthcare, or even energy, power. We've seen a lot of use cases that if in the past it cost them, let's say, $10,000 to achieve certain things, with LLMs that only costs like $1,000 for them. So it already creates value for them. But you're right, I think we do need to worry about value creation at the application layer. If you spend hundreds of billions of dollars at the infrastructure layer and you just cannot come up with applications that creates 10 times more than that, it's not going to be sustainable. So even though we've seen all kinds of use cases in all kinds of different scenarios, probably more like the to-B side. On the to-C side, the consumer side, we haven't seen a so-called super application like in the mobile internet stage, the social media, right? The daily active users in the hundreds of millions, and people spend like 2 hours a day on one app. We haven't seen opportunities like that, but I'm sure as time passes by, someone will figure this out. You will be able to create an app that's very sticky. Right now, even for ChatGPT, I think their DAU/MAU, meaning daily active user / monthly active user, is 16%. And if you look at Facebook or WeChat, it's like 90%. And the average time spent per user for the chatbot is like 10 minutes. And for the social media, it's like 100 minutes, 120 minutes. So it's still quite far away from that level of application. And I think the whole world is actually looking for this kind of super app at this stage.
I think that's a great answer. Just one final question for a minute. Open source or closed source for these models, what do you think the direction should be?
Yeah, this is something that a lot of industry experts are debating on. You have closed source players like OpenAI, Anthropic, and you have open sources like DeepSeek, Llama. It's a race. What we learned in the past few months is that it turns out that open source can help you to get more attention. If you open things up, a lot of people will be curious enough to try it, right? This will help spread the technology much faster. And because we are at the very early stage of AI, generative AI innovation, a faster spread will help increase adoption, will help more people to try the technology, therefore create a better opportunity for innovation at the application layer. So I just want to reinforce my point that what's more important is application. It's not which language model are you using, it's what kind of super app, what kind of value you can create at the application layer.
Amazing. Robin, we could have spent another hour here. Thank you so much for the answers, and thank you for your time. And I look forward to seeing you more in this conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next panel discussion is titled The New Economic Revolution, An African Perspective. This session is moderated by Eleni Jokos from CNN. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished panel.
Please take a seat. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Eleni Jokos. I'm an anchor and correspondent at CNN. I'm the host of a show called Connecting Africa, as well as a show called Marketplace Middle East. And I think it's really important that our first panel this morning at this conference is focusing on the African economic revolution. I'd like to welcome my guests, and then I'd like to share with you some numbers that I think will put the African continent into incredible perspective. A big welcome to His Excellency Dr. David Monina Sangye, Chief Minister, Prime Minister of Sierra Leone, first ever Chief Innovation Officer. Those claps, yes? He is incredible, he's a powerhouse. Also former Basic and Senior Secondary Education Minister for Sierra Leone. Incredible to have you with us. His Excellency Akinwumi Adesina, President of the African Development Bank. Welcome, sir. And Tony Elumelu, founder of the Tony Elumelu Foundation and chairman of Heirs Holdings, which is an incredible conglomerate touching every single sector in many African countries. So ladies and gentlemen, round of applause for my fantastic guests this morning. I want us to take just a few seconds to think about these incredible figures because it puts things into perspective. And some of you might know them, but I want to put them all together because it'll really put things into sort of an incredible basket to understand the brilliance of the African continent. 1.5 billion people, 60% of whom are below the age of 25. 12 of the top 20 fastest growing economies in the world are in Africa. 30% of the world's minerals are on the continent, 40% of gold reserves, 90% of chromium, platinum, palladium, diamonds, cobalt, and everything else on the periodic table, everything. Endowed with incredible natural resources. I guess the best resource the African continent has is its people, its resilience that we see, and the incredible way of hustling to create brilliance on the continent. So when we talk about an economic revolution, we've also have to come to terms with the resource curse that I guess has plagued the continent in many ways, lack of industrialization, and how to break through those boundaries. So ladies and gentlemen, let's get into the conversation. Did I get all the numbers right, Mr. President?
Yeah.
Did I?
Yep.
And 65% of arable land.
Yep.
Yeah? We wake up every single day in the past 3 weeks to a new world. Lots of things are happening and changing geopolitically, and I want to talk about Africa's growth potential in the new geopolitical global context. Tell me, Mr. Adesina, how are you weighing this up? If I'm sitting and recalibrating my future, I'm sure all you important people are doing the same.
Well, I mean, thank you very much. So I have a little bit of a cold, but let me say first and foremost, I'm delighted to be here. And I congratulate the government of UAE for organizing this fantastic event. It's my first time of actually participating. I'm amazed about it. First and foremost, you said it all. Africa is the place to be. I mean, for all the reasons that you said, I'm not worried about Africa for any reason. First, if you look at the demography of Africa, you got 75% of the population less than the age of 35. 600 million people between the ages of 15 and 35. So that tells you that Africa is going to be workforce of the world, the labor workshop of the world, where you have skills, talent, entrepreneurship that will unleash a lot of innovation around the world. Secondly, you were just talking about the issue of agriculture. Look, to feed the world, 9.5 billion people, 10 billion people by 2050, that's not going to come from anywhere in Asia. It's not going to come from Latin America or US or Canada or anywhere in the world, or China, by the way. It's going to come with Africa. Now, take a look at the energy transition in the world, what you were just mentioning, whether it is lithium-ion batteries, whether it is electric vehicles, whether it's platinum, whether it's copper, whether it's graphite, whether it's any of this lithium-ion, all is in Africa. So what Africa actually does with these resources will shape the future of the world that we are talking about. So I am not worried at all about Africa. In fact, I am excited about Africa. And what I want to say is to take a look at a continent with the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, with a population that we have of 1.4, almost 1.5 billion people, a market size of $3.4 trillion. So what we have to do is trade among ourselves, build infrastructure, integrate our financial markets, our stock exchanges, and of course have the right policies, macroeconomic and fiscal policies that attract investment. In fact, for the investors that are here, what I want to say is if you're not investing in Africa, actually, I'm going to ask you, where are you investing in? Look, the fact of the matter is Africa is going to be critical for the world. You were talking about the new changes, in the world. Yes, of course. President Trump was elected by the American people to develop America, and he's going to do a great job at it. I have no doubt about it. But my role, our job in Africa, is to market Africa's opportunities. And I'm sure that everybody around the world recognizes these dynamics. Africa is too critical not to be looked at, and Africa is not going to beg its way into development. Africa is going to trade and invest its way into development. I have no doubt that Africa will be the lighthouse for the world under any circumstance.
Round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. He asked a really important question. How many of you here invest in Africa in some way, in an African country? Hands up.
Now we got to change that.
We got to change that. But a lot of opportunity here, right? A lot of opportunity.
Yeah, but can I just say something? Sorry, my God, folks, just because of that thing that you said. At the UAE, you have $65 billion a year that's actually going from UAE to Africa, much higher than other parts of the Gulf countries. I think Saudi Arabia does about $25 billion, Qatar probably about $7.8 billion. So UAE is very, very important. But this point I want to make, because there are a lot of investors here. You hear a lot of things about Africa in terms of risk. Well, look, you walk across the street, it's a risk. You eat food, it's a risk. Africa's risk is not different from any part of the world. It's a risk-return world. We actually asked Moody's Analytics to look at the risk profile of Africa, of investments in infrastructure over the last 14 years. Guess what they found, Eleni? They found that the rate of loss in Africa is 1.7%. That in Latin America was about 13%. The one in Eastern Europe was more about 10%. In Western Asia, it was about 4.5%. So Africa is less riskier than any other part of the world. So I hope that when I come back next year, that we will have a lot more people with their hands up investing in Africa.
A sea full of hands up is what we're expecting. I think you've sold it in a brilliant way. And by the way, the perceptions of risk, the negative perception of risk really does stick. And we're seeing that in the cost of capital on the continent. Your Excellency, Chief Minister, I want to talk about Sierra Leone, and it's a really fascinating country, dealt with the Ebola crisis, decades of civil war, ended in 2002. We've seen incredible changes in terms of the poverty levels. We've seen huge shifts. You're one of the most fascinating people, and you're leading an important segment within government. You were also the former Chief Innovation Officer. And the important question is, Sierra Leone, in a changing world, in a new context, what does that mean, and how are you looking at the future and an economic revolution, whether that's attainable?
Thank you so much. I do think, by the way, just picking up on where the President left, when we speak about risk, it's a language that we also use. We speak about the youth bulge, we speak about resource curse. We can change the language often to reflect the opportunities and the realities on the ground, and which is why this panel is so important, because we can speak about the new economic revolution from our perspective. The progress we've seen in Sierra Leone has been largely driven by the kind of leadership that we have. His Excellency President Julius Maada Bio has made it a point to invest in human capital. So the reforms that we have seen in education, the reforms that we've seen in gender, the reforms that we've seen in good governance have all slowly been adding up, and you can see the dividends beginning to pay off quite quickly. One of the most critical things that we've done is we've focused on inclusion and impact. The president just at the UN last year told the world about radical inclusion. And radical inclusion isn't just a random idea. It's that the things that work have to work for everyone. I do feel that when there's economic progress, positively for a few, there will be civil and political chaos for the majority. So if we're speaking about new economic revolution, it has to be for everyone. It has to be inclusive, and the impacts that we speak about must be felt by everyone. And this is not too difficult, really, to do. We just have to shift our mindsets. We speak about critical minerals. Sierra Leone has had lots of mineral conversations. It's mostly been negative. But in cabinet recently, one of the things that His Excellency is trying to have us do is to think about what I call consensus concessions. It's so easy to speak about concessions from any one of these countries or from private sector that is 100 years, lots of waivers, employees coming from abroad, everything gets shipped out. That's not consensus.
Bad deals, by the way, which turned things into a curse, and I think that's where people talk about that. So to break away from that is to stop signing bad deals.
And I think
what leverage do you have to say, listen, no, we can't do it at this rate?
I think leadership and inclusion comes back. Look, we sign. The Minister of Finance is here. We sign. We sit. We bring these agreements in. If we think about, we said investment, if we think about not just pennies, but the people and the planet, then the deals and the agreements we sign with our conscience will work for the people, will bring economic value for everyone, for the investor, for the government, and the people who are there. And here's an example. Sierra Leone has, I think, a quarter of the world's deposits of rutile. Foreign companies have been mining rutile since the 1900s. The agreement that was taken to Parliament many years ago was terrible for the country. The country will export all this rutile, and we still got all these waivers and exemptions by that foreign company. Until recently, a Sierra Leonean has bought rutile, the company. And we're beginning to engage and see now how those resources get to stay in the country. We can now speak about how that ties in with energy because they are invested in energy. We can think about how they can employ people. The dynamics change. So we as a government, leadership, again, which is why I said leadership has been at the heart, and His Excellency President Bio has been doing this, investing in people, investing in planets, investing, and then the pennies, is that when we place people at the center, everyone, inclusion, we use our conscience to make sure that the deals that we sign are bringing in more energy, are tied with infrastructure, are tied with the ports that are there, are making sure that there are schools that are being built. And when that happens, our people will win. And I think then it becomes not a youth bulge, but it becomes an opportunity where young people in Sierra Leone can be the leaders. The CEO of the company is a young guy. This company I'm just talking about that was bought by a Sierra Leonean. Those things are happening, and we'll see more of it as we get more young people who are in leadership.
Yeah, and to note, incredible generational representation here. These, from what I heard backstage, is that they've been very involved in your life.
Both of them are my mentors. They are my mentors.
This is what it's about. Tony, I want you to jump in here. We're talking about perceptions of risk. And by the way, we've spoken about these bad deals incessantly. I've talked about them so much in my career, specifically on just why the perceptions of risk towards Africa have been so skewed. From a private sector perspective, tell me why it makes sense to invest on the continent. What kind of returns can people expect? And why you shouldn't be looking at these perceptions that Africa equates to, negativity and it's high risk, so therefore you've got to expect high return, which is when essentially we start to see bad deals being signed.
I want to commend the UAE government for organizing this forum. Eleni, I speak as a private sector person who has investments on 4 continents, including the Gulf states, and someone who also has a diversified investment portfolio from power, oil and gas, financial services, and healthcare. There's nowhere else we get the kind of returns on investments as what we make in Africa. I say to people often that the glass is half full. You may decide to see risks or challenges, or you may see opportunities. But ability to identify opportunities and structure your approach in a way that addresses and mitigates those risks confers extra competitive advantage on you and your business. So I speak to our friends here. As the president of the African Development Bank said, no better person to say it because he has the statistics, he sees what's going on the continent. There's nowhere else that gives you the kind of returns on investment as what you make on the continent. Yes, stereotypes, information provided in a certain way that all you see is challenges, but just look at us. And we keep investing in our group. We generate, or we have capacity to generate 2,000 megawatts of electricity on a daily basis, and today we generate about 750 megawatts, which is very significant on the continent. There's nowhere else you can invest in power sector and you start paying dividend to investors year 3. That happens in Africa. We are in financial services sector, huge, significant returns on investment. So the time is now, and there are certain factors shaping all of this. If you look at the demography in Africa, as our moderator Eleni said, the median age is 19. In other parts of the world, it's 38, 32. This is huge opportunity. 1.5 billion people, over 65% under the age of, as I said before, under the age of 30. So this is significant investment opportunity for everyone. Let us invest, but we also believe, and I said that we have a few challenges on the continent. We don't run away from these challenges, but those are not challenges that impede the decision to invest in a market that holds so much potential for investors.
President Adesina, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on the point you made about, and also the Chief Minister's point about the natural resource cost. I don't believe there's anything called natural resource cost. I'm an economist. People say that all the time. The issue is not, how can resources that are supposed to make you rich be a cost? What you have is a cost of leadership, lack of transparency, lack of accountability in the management of those natural resources. And that's what we at the African Development Bank try to do. So you take, for example, I mean, you were talking about the case of Sierra Leone, but if you pick, for example, the DRC Congo, okay, we have challenges there now, but we're going to solve those problems. The issue is total amount of resources back of the envelope in that area is probably $24 trillion. And so the issue is, how do we structure deals that are in the interest of our economies, in which royalties and taxes that needs to be paid are paid, and that's why we have the Africa Legal Support Facility at the African Development Bank to help Sierra Leone and DRC, several other countries to be able to structure deals that are in their own interest. Tony was talking just now about the issue of young people, and actually he's a leader in Africa when it comes to the issue of investing in young people. Now, we support his foundation to do that, but there's a lot of opportunities in Africa for young people. Look, agriculture, take agriculture. Now, people talk about oil and gas, yes, okay, but who drinks oil? Who smokes gas?
You've got to be transparent here, President Adesina. You were the former agriculture minister in Nigeria, so you know a thing or two.
Yeah, but I was just going to say that for investors here today, take a look at Africa in terms of agriculture. The size of that market, food market, by 2030 is going to be $1 trillion. And so investing in agriculture, investing in agricultural value chains is the key. And we can support the Gulf countries out of Africa, in which case we invest in special agro-industrial processing zones. We're spending close to $3 billion developing those zones. Look, if you have an aircraft, you don't need an aircraft, you don't have a landing strip. So we're building a landing strip for investments to land in Africa in a smooth way. And I'm confident about that as President of the African Development Bank. We organized the Africa Investment Forum, which of course you are in. We started it in 2018 till today. We mobilized more than $225 billion. We just had the last one in Rabat in Morocco last year. In less than 72 hours, we had mobilized $29.4 billion. So please, when you think of Africa, Tony is absolutely right. You know, you may think of challenges, but look, my job is not to talk about challenges. It's to market opportunities for Africa and manage those challenges. Your money is safe. Your money and your capital is safe in Africa, and you should be investing a lot more in Africa.
And let me say that those challenges are actually opportunities for investment,
That's right.
like infrastructure in particular. So there's a lot we can do in that space: infrastructure, access to electricity, power development on the continent, transportation. They present opportunities for investors.
Yeah, greenfield investments, because you've got an opportunity to jump into something, into a country, because there's so many to pick from on the African continent, then you can really plug in and fill gaps.
You know, check the energy that Tony just talked about. He's investing in energy. So myself and the president of the World Bank, Ajay Banga, got together and launched something called Mission 300, which is to provide 300 million Africans with access to electricity. That is a massive investment opportunity in power generation, in power transmission, and power distribution for companies all around the world. So just imagine. And we're working with governments like in Sierra Leone, the president was there, and others, to make sure that the power purchase agreements are there, the cost-reflective tariffs are there, the utilities are independent and very well managed, and that the procurement systems are transparent in the way you can have the least cost way of doing things. So we are improving the business and investment environment in Africa. Quite honestly, I don't believe Africa will develop by aid. I don't believe that it will develop by simply, freebies. We don't want freebies. We want to invest. We want investors investing in our continent so that we can actually unlock the power of our continent. You know, Africa is going to be the lighthouse of the world. It's going to come from private capital, and we're doing all that we can for that to happen, and I'm confident that it will happen.
Exactly, and if you're not part of the story, you miss out. I want to touch on a couple of things. We've got so much to get through. But from what I understand, there's this huge race. Who's going to dominate in Africa? Whether it's China, whether it's Russia, the US kind of seems like it's perhaps out of the game and it's using leverage and so forth. Do you think there's a race to try and secure critical mineral supply? And do you think there is a different agency in Africa? We're going, listen, we've got leverage right now.
Sure. I think the answer is simple. Who's going to dominate in Africa? Africans are going to dominate in Africa. I think, as the president said, leadership is most important. And for me, I believe that progressive, social, democratic radicalism is important. And it's not just terms. Progressive, because we live in a completely different age today. We saw in the opening panel where we were in 2000, 2020 is different from today. So the policies have to be different. The reforms, the institutions have to be different. We have to be progressive. Social democratic, because if it works only for a few, the rest of the world is going to be affected. Inequities cannot drive our development. The infrastructure we put has to work for everyone. And radical, because frankly, with the demographic that you spoke about, with the reality that you just highlighted, the status quo and the time in which these things happen must not remain. We need radically new solutions. So leadership, yes, but I believe it is progressive, social democratic, radicals that will dominate in Africa, and they will be Africans.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I just want to make sure that investors are here. There's so many of them. And the three of us want to make sure that folks are comfortable with capital investments in Africa. Now, people talk about risk. Yes, market risk, political risk, project risk, and all of that. As African Development Bank, our role is to manage those risks. In fact, we have partial credit guarantees, partial risk guarantees that allow you to reduce your counterparty risk at scale in Africa. In fact, we are developing something called the Africa Investment Guarantee Agency, which will allow you to be able to actually guarantee your investments against climate risk, your investment against equity guarantees, but also guarantees in terms of what you're doing for political risk, so in terms of war, conflicts, or incompatibility of currencies and so on. So those instruments are there. The opportunities are massive. The risk instruments are there. But I think you see a lot more openness, more transparency, more accountability in how governments are running things in Africa. And so if you're not investing in Africa, this is your opportunity.
You're going to lose out. And by the way, I forgot the most critical resource, commodity that Africa produces, that I tell you will create global upheaval from the young to the old. Do you know what it is? 70%, no, that's even tastier than 70% of the global supply comes from Africa. Cocoa. And I tell you, if we stop selling cocoa to the rest of the continent, can you imagine what people would do if they didn't get chocolate?
Yeah, but we don't want to...
I'm just saying we've got leverage.
No, but...
I'm not an economist, but no.
No, Eleni, you know, look, we have minerals, metals, oil, gas, cocoa, coffee, tea, and all of that.
Yeah.
That's not the issue for us. The issue is we want to have industrial manufacturing, value-added products in Africa in which, look, the export of raw commodities of any kind is a door to poverty. But the export of industrial value-added manufacturing to allow Africa's share of global manufacturing to rise and to move up in global value chains, that is the highway to prosperity. So what we are talking about is industrializing Africa.
Exactly. And
creating those value chains.
And creating chocolates in Africa, apart from all the other things that we need to produce locally. Ladies and gentlemen, we're timed out. We've run over. Thank you so much. Round of applause for my fantastic guests.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next session is a keynote by Hatem Dawedar, Group CEO of E&.
Assalamu alaikum, good morning. Excellencies, heads of states, ministers, government officials, heads of international organizations, and business leaders. Welcome and good morning. I'd like to first start by extending my appreciation to His Excellency Mohammed El-Gergawi for his vision and for his continuous push into creating this dialogue every year. And it's coming at a very critical moment in history. This is a time again when we see the inflection point in the world. And I'm talking here about technology. I will not talk about geopolitics, about what's happening, but about technology and connectivity. In the past few years, through activities like the Edison Alliance, we managed to connect over 5 billion people in the world. That's actually almost 5.5 billion if we count the 270 million connected in 2024. But this is still not enough. There are 2.5 billion people in the world that are not connected. And this really is a time where we need to see how we can work on this to avoid growing another gap, a digital divide that will also lead to a further economical divide in the future. Imagine with me 2 students, one in an advanced economy, having access to personalized AI programs for education, being able to collaborate globally with his peers with all the right tools, and another student in the global south today having to walk, if not minutes, maybe hours to school, and having very basic training and teaching equipment there. And then these two have to compete in the future. It's really unfair. And if we don't do something today to bridge that divide, it will become even a bigger problem in the future. Connectivity is one of the important bases for progress, and we need to all work together, whether it's governments, businesses, and organizations, to make that happen. And today, with the advancement of AI, this becomes even more critical, as we can really help a lot of the global South with solutions that improve education, improve healthcare, and also improve economic activity. And this is really something that we can make happen. It has improved, and it can improve further. And when we're talking about the next session, talking about innovation, there are many technologies that are coming that can help connect some of these people. For example, backhauling cellular coverage on satellite links. It used to be something that's very expensive. Now it's there. Redesigning the network using AI. This is something that is here today. So there are really many ways to make that happen and make it happen in a fast way. Let us also not forget that technology, connectivity, and AI can also improve sustainability and can really contribute to a better environment. So while on the short term, connecting data centers, all of this consumes energy and power, this also produces solutions that can improve the world in a much faster way. So let's all work together to make sure that we can bring this to life, that we can connect the next 2.5 billion people in the planet and make sure that the digital divide closes and not widens. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next panel discussion is titled, Can we innovate our way to a more connected world? This session is moderated by Sam Jacobs, Editor-in-Chief of Time. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished panel.
Good morning. It's a privilege to be here with this incredible group of leaders, truly a global perspective about connectivity, which seems to be the perspective that we desperately need today. So following those initial remarks, I'd love to start with you, Margarita. What does connectivity mean for your business and for society?
I think Atem positioned this really well. For society, today, connectivity is essential. We always talk about how connectivity can support development, but the reality is there cannot be any real development without connectivity. I'd like to paraphrase the words of UN Secretary General during COVID when he was saying, actually, we are moving from the old divide in the world between the haves and the have-not towards a new divide, which is between those who have access to connectivity and those who don't. And for my company, for Vodafone, we operate in 17 different countries across Europe and Africa, and our mission statement is very simple. It's that we connect everyone, wherever they are. And that's the focus of the work we do. Every year we spend billions in building networks, under the ground, above the ground, mobile networks, reaching more and more customers with better networks. But the most recent evolution, and the one we are most proud of at the moment, is actually adding to our networks antennas in the sky through satellites. I think this is a great opportunity to connect those areas of the world which are most remote. Hatem was talking about the 2.5 billion people who don't have access to the internet. Of those, there are 300 million that are nowhere near any form of connectivity. And satellite can get us there. 2 weeks ago, I did the very first mobile space video call in the world with normal phones. Your normal smartphone, another normal smartphone on the other side, and a call from an area which never had signal ever before, going through these antennas in the sky. We are now going to commercially launch the service later this year, and I think it's a great opportunity to bring connectivity to the most remote areas of the planet.
Mickey, you're a new entrant into this connectivity space in some ways. You said to me earlier this morning that you hope eventually to make mobile completely free. Why, and what will that look like?
Well, simply speaking, especially wireless connectivity is a digital road. And roads should be, of course, safe and as cheap as possible and as fast as possible. It's better for the society. And when we enter, so Rakuten is now #1 e-commerce company, #1 online travel agent, #1 online banking, #1 brokerage firm, and #1 online insurance company, and so forth and so forth. And we are the first company who went sort of down into the network layer from OTT layer. So that the way we think is completely different from legacy existing telecom companies. And I feel the current telecom industry is old. I'm sorry, but it's old, and it's a legacy, and everything is time to be transformed. My initial thinking is why telecom network doesn't work like Wi-Fi, right? And then, of course, there are so many reasons. You need to guarantee the quality, you need to charge, and you need to make sure that it's secure. But it is, for the society, better, cheaper. Of course, some people want to require very high quality demand, which we can charge it. But basically, for example, Rakuten members, if they buy from us, if they use our credit card, if they use our bank, it is completely free already, as a matter of fact. So I think we have to reconsider the business model. And this business model, in my opinion, is obsolete and old. That is really started from very oligopolized network device companies, and the fact that spectrum is too expensive. So there's an entrance barrier for new entrants, and wherever we have entrance into the industry, the price is coming down and down and down. In Japan, we created a competition. The mobile bill became down about almost 40%, and we gave back almost 4 trillion yen, or maybe 30 billion yen back to the consumers. So I think it's time to reconsider the business model, not just from the industry perspective. From today, we have so much honored the people from the government. You have to think about what is wireless connectivity.
Hatem, thinking about reconsidering business models, how do you balance what's good for your business and what's good for society when it comes to innovating around connectivity?
Well, you have to really open up. Right?
Sorry, that was for Hatem.
Oh,
sorry, I appreciate it.
Sorry about this.
No, we love your enthusiasm.
Sorry.
It's a tough one. You can take it.
Exactly.
Look, I think it's very important to understand that what's good for business is also good for society. It doesn't really...
We don't have to choose.
It's not a choice you have to make, because at the end of the day, if I'm talking in our telecom part of the business, when we connect people, it's customers for us, it makes revenue, and we can build on it with a lot of other things. And actually, part of our transformation into a tech company is allowing and enabling these people to do a lot more things. So we have been launching fintech applications in most of our countries. We are now providing for corporates across the markets, cybersecurity, cloud computing, and so on. So all of the things. So connecting people, whether we're connecting people in the most advanced, I would always say, and I'm very biased, the most advanced infrastructure in the world here in the UAE, where we have the highest fiber penetration in the world, the fastest networks in the world. Or I'm talking about our networks in subsidiaries we have in Mauritania or Mali and so on. It's still customers that are important, and by connecting these customers, there is an economical gain as well. I think the difference is really in the regulatory environment, and that's what makes the difference, because even in countries where there's very little ARPU or revenue per user, if the regulatory environment is friendly enough to businesses, you can still find the money to invest and help these economies, help the people get connected, and at the same time get some returns. But when the regulatory environment in some of these countries see it's a goose, and I'd rather kill the goose rather than wait for the eggs, that becomes the problem. And we see that, unfortunately, in many countries.
Margarita, backstage, you said be happier talking about innovation than regulation this morning. You described, you have 350 customers in Africa, and you described it as a paradise when it comes to thinking about innovation. Why is Africa a good place for Vodafone?
Africa is where we have our biggest innovation, because Europe has made some mistakes historically in regulation that have been stifling innovation. And by mistakes, I mean a little bit the golden goose approach that Atem was mentioning to spectrum. Give me a lot of money now as opposed to invest it in the network so that the governments can take it. But most importantly, they have played the logic of fragmentation. And our businesses need scale to be able to innovate. And African countries in the main give us the opportunity to reach that scale. If I take the example of Vodafone, Africa is where we have invented mobile money. The very first fintech platform happened here, and it's called M-Pesa, and to this day is the largest fintech platform in Africa and has transformed lives. The same is true for IoT. Across Africa, we have fantastic applications of IoT supporting areas such as agriculture or energy, where in particular when governments are playing the role of architects with us on the transformation of the economy, you can see all the benefits of innovation accruing to drive economic development.
On the innovation front, Mickey, we were talking about DeepSeek backstage and just the changes that are happening around AI at this very moment. How is AI going to change how we all connect around the world?
Well, for example, for the usage of AI for the network management, Rakuten only have 800 employees versus our competitors have 15,000. And we manage all the network addresses, energy consumptions by AI. Why we can do it? Because our network is like an internet. It's all managed by software, no dependency on the hardware. So I think another big problem of telecom industry is so much hardware dependent, which is not really easy to manage. But yeah, maybe you can, but it's going to be challenging. So that's the way we should go with. And then talking more broadly about AI, obviously there's two AIs. One is what we call very strong AI, like OpenAI or DeepSeek or Gemini or Google. And we also have what we call weak AI, which is more specialized in something like manufacturing or medicine or some self-driving. I think these are very, very promising business model. But when we go to the really big, open, strong AI, I don't know whether it's going to be a sustainable model, or maybe some of the vendors is going to reopen up the open source or the algorithm. We will see. I don't know, to be honest.
Just wanted to build on the fact that AI will need strong networks. And in some countries where networks are not well invested, don't have enough capacity or enough speed, latency, all these will be characteristics that today people don't necessarily feel the need of every day, because for particularly the consumer use of mobile, you have more limited needs.
AI will need strong networks, and strong networks will need AI.
Most likely, most of the AI function will be stored on edge, where it is closer to your mobile. So even you don't have very expensive devices, you will be able to use edge as AI. And Rakuten has built almost 450 regional data site, and we're trying to put our Rakuten large language model onto the edge. Yeah.
Adam, how do we overcome these clear obstacles when it comes to digital transformation?
Digital transformation?
For hot time, sorry.
Yeah. Sorry.
Look, we love having you in the middle.
Okay, I should step back a little bit like this, huh?
Look, I think the most important thing to clear any obstacle is actually dialogue. So being here today, lots of governments are here, including many of the countries where we operate. I think it's very important for everyone to understand the potential that can be unleashed by technology. And by technology means by connecting people, by having the proper applications, the proper training for the workforce. Again, AI is going to change the world. It's going to change the nature of jobs. If people don't learn that early on and be able to use AI in their specific roles, it will be a problem. So it's very, very important that we have these dialogues, that we continue to work together in order to be able to improve on this. And this could be legislation, regulation, all kinds of things that help get this forward in terms of policy and make it work for everyone. And I give, again, some examples. Data sovereignty on AI. There are some countries want to use AI, but they don't want their data to go outside. How can we solve this? How can we create, again, the security of this data as it moves across borders and be able to utilize and harness all these effects? That's one example. And it's essential, as also AI needs energy and so on, so we cannot build AI models everywhere. Today, 7% of the global population has English as their native language. 20% of the global population speaks English, yet 70% of the learning of AI today is based on English. So there's a huge bias because it's based on the literature and the things that are written by 7%, the 20% understand, but is being there for the 70% that don't use it.
Well, I think we're going to have to stop there. A wonderful conversation. Thank you all very much for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next panel discussion is titled, How Will Strategic Investments Unlock New Frontiers for Economic Growth? This session is moderated by John Defterios. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished panel.
Good morning, everybody. If you can go ahead and take a seat, please, in between the transitions to this session. I'm delighted to chair this session because it's strategic nature. So both by the drive of the World Government Summit and DP World, They looked at East Africa, and it was germinated here a dozen years ago, as the chairman knows, to look at that region as a strategic outpost for development and growth as well. Again, often overlooked in the global economy is that this is a market of better than 500 million consumers, with Ethiopia at the heart of it, with a consuming base of 130 million, growth of 9% over the last 20 years. We're delighted to have the President of Somaliland, who was elected to office in December with a full mandate of 64%. And of course, the chairman of DP World, who has made a commitment to East Africa and Somaliland. I would say that it was this move by DP World that helped plant a flag for development, which is a priority for the president. So I'd like to start in, Mr. President, on the Berbera port, the strategic nature sitting as a crossroads for the Middle East, East Africa, and the links to Asia. We know the disruption to the Gulf of Aden over the last 2 years. What has it meant, that $400 million investment by DP World, to economic growth, what it represents to GDP, your income for foreign investment and receipts as a result of the port? Because a lot of people don't understand what actually has been developed on the ground. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Before I answer the question, I want to tell the audience I'm from Somaliland. One of the governments in the future. Berbera Port is the most famous port in the Red Sea. It's a very old port. And DP World has invested $400 million in Berbera Port. It was transformative. That investment was transformative. It has modernized the port. It has increased the capacity of the port. And now it became a very important port that can give service to the to most of the African countries that have no port. Our main customer and neighbor and our friendly country is Ethiopia, which is more than 140 million population. The Berbera will give a service to Ethiopia now. I expect we have to finalize our transit and trade agreements with Ethiopia soon, inshallah.
Good. Is that something you think you can get done within your first year in office, which would conclude in December 2025? Because everybody's been looking to see if we can get that agreement unlocked and what it would do for development and trade for Ethiopia as well.
My plan is to finalize before the end of the year.
That's quite significant. Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I remember discussing this port with you going back 10 years ago and planting a flag, if you will, in Eastern Africa. It's not your first foray there. How does Berbera rate in all the operations you have in nearly 80 countries around the world in terms of modernization, the intelligent infrastructure, the strategic nature of how it can serve as a crossroads? Because you can make comparisons to what you have in Latin America, Far East Asia, Europe, of course, and the United States. What's the modernization that's actually been undertaken?
Thank you. First of all, I am happy to attend the Government Summit, and I'm honored with the President, whom in short notice came, and he told me I'd been only a few days in the office, and we told him, well, I think it's a good audience, they need to listen to you as a new President. We did a study on Ethiopia. Ethiopia has a double-digit growth in their economy. It's a country of over 100 million people. And the study shows that Ethiopia needs at least 5 ports to cope with the growth that they're going to see in their country. And we selected Berbera for many reasons. First of all, it's an old port. It has been in existence before any ports, in fact, the Red Sea. Unfortunately, it was ignored, but we worked with the government and they encouraged us. We invested in it. Somaliland is not a small country. They have over 4 million people, and a lot of people are businessmen and traders. And we are looking forward for the economic corridor between Ethiopia and, of course, Somaliland, where the President just mentioned. I hope it could be done as soon as possible. This agreement will facilitate trade between both countries. Somaliland is very close to the main distribution area in Ethiopia, which is Dir Dawa, which is the main logistic area. And so the relation between the countries are being very good, and many Somaliland people live in Ethiopia, and Ethiopia looks with positive attitude toward Somaliland. We definitely found an opportunity. We developed the port. Immediately, cargo started to come. We are able to handle any size of vessels in Berbera. There is another stage of expansion if needed. The government also, His Excellency the President, provided land for industries. We have already factories under construction, and there are more factories coming to that place. It has a unique situation whereby they're very close to Ethiopia. It has also a unique situation where they are on the maritime routes that connect India, Far East, all the way through the Suez Canal. So it's a very strategic location, but also for business, we have been very happy with the growth of the business.
Good. I'd like to have the strategic input, Chairman, on why the UAE, I like to say UAE Inc., decided to go into Somaliland, because you were in there before anybody else was even thinking about it. So what was the strategic decision, the geopolitical, geoeconomic decision to say, you know what, we can make this work. This country is not recognized, and I want to talk to the President officially with global recognition for statehood. But you took a risk, and it's paying off dividends. But why?
Let me tell you, when we invest in any country, we don't look at any political motive or strategic even. Strategy is not important for us. What's important for us is, can I develop a business? Can I make companies benefit as shipping line to use this location? Can this location become profitable operation? This is very important, crucial. And we look at the growth of the GDP. If the GDP is growing, then that means the cargo will grow. So that is the reason why. Second, traditionally, business from Africa is very important for us. And for many, many centuries. In fact, when you look at Kenya, Tanzania, Somalia, and Ethiopia, they are main traders of Dubai for a long time. A lot of re-export goes to those countries. So it's natural that we set up there. And I tell you, when we set up, immediately companies from Dubai also and Abu Dhabi set up there to provide services. So it is part of us really encouraging and strengthening our trading relation with Africa.
Great. Mr. President, I don't want to put you on the spot here because it's a very strategic time for Somaliland. Some would not want to be on the radar of President Trump, especially allies with tariffs, and I want to address that with the chairman in the next question. But this new administration is talking about recognition for Somaliland, and I'm curious what strings are attached. What do you need to provide to the U.S. administration? But I think the Trump administration sees exactly what DP World and the UAE sees here in terms of its positioning, the military capabilities, the access into the seas without disruption of the Gulf of Aden. What's on the table here, if you can share where we are today with global recognition for statehood?
Well, regarding the current situation of the whole world, Somaliland is located in a very strategic location. It has 850 kilometers of seashore in the Gulf of Aden. Somaliland, Berbera, the border port and the airport has been used previously during the Cold War. One is by Russians and one is by Americans. So you can understand the strategic location of Berbera. Somaliland, as a country, has become independent on 26 June 1960. But unfortunately, it has chosen to give up its sovereignty to find Greater Somalia and join it with Somalia, who got its independence 5 days later. of 1st July 1960. And again, Somaliland has regained or reclaimed its independence on 18 May 1991. But until 1991, it has not been recognized officially by most of the countries. But all the countries in the world have been dealing with Somaliland as a separate entity. Somaliland is a country, is a democratic nation, which holds elections and gives a transfer of power in a democratic way.
Yeah, peaceful transition, actually.
Yes.
I was asking something. We have limited time. What's going to be the result of this recognition by President Trump? Does it jumpstart global official recognition as a country, in your view, sir?
Regarding our democratic administrative system, we are expecting everywhere from the international community. We have all good relations with the United States, with Great Britain and other countries, but now we hope that the United States may be the first country to recognize Somaliland.
That would jumpstart the whole process, I would imagine, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, we sat 3 weeks ago in Davos for the DP World Global Trade Outlook 2025, and you said something very prescient at the time. You said these moves by President Trump on trade, even with allies like Canada and Mexico, the European Union, they're supposed to be close friends, but the tariffs have moved forward in a big way. But you said something then that he's desiring fair trade, not protectionist policies.
Yes.
I'm going to put you on the spot here. Do you still believe that? Is the case? I know even the UAE with its aluminium exports are quite concerned.
Well, for Trump, he is looking for fair trade. Fair trade, not free trade. Fair trade, in his mind, and he said it many times, is if American market is open, then he expects other countries to open their market. China's market has to be open for American products. This is the crucial thing for him. Now, with Trump, I've been following him for a long time. It is not what he says. So when you listen to him, his announcement, look at what he does, not what he says. When he said, for example, about Canada, I'm going to put a tariff. And then deliberately he will threaten so that he can go back and negotiate a deal. He's a businessman. He wants to make a deal. He wants people to come to the table to discuss. So with the Canadian, he asked them to do something. They fulfilled it. With the Mexican, it's all held. It's not going to be applicable. I think even with China, there'll be threats of retaliatory tariffs, but eventually the goal from him is not to fight, is not to sit on the table and discuss. So sometimes he comes with a very tough announcement, but what he wants is the people who listen to it to come and sit on the table to negotiate. At the end of the day, he wants to negotiate a deal.
Good. It's not going to be calamitous and push the U.S. into a recession, in your view?
I don't know about recession, but I don't believe that he wants to stop trade. He wants fair treatment of American products. He wants things, you know, when you talk about Panama, for example, you know, he wants to come with a deal with the Panamanian. Basically, that gives him something to say, I won the agreement.
Good. Mr. President, any final thoughts as we conclude? Because there's also a potential for the military commanders to come into Somaliland as well,
Hopefully, that relationship will continue and develop. And I thank the whole forum, and I thank the organizer of the event for inviting me here. Thank you very much.
Good. Nice to meet you in person. President Abdul Ali, Chairman Sultan bin Sulaim. Yeah. Can we have a nice round of applause for both of them? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Урматтуу Дипанжан Рой Чоудхари мырза, урматтуу саммиттин катышуучулары, айымдар жана мырзалар. Эң алгач Birikкен Араб Эмираттарынын жетекчилигине министрлер кабинетинин иштери боюнча министри улуу мартабалуу Мохаммед бин Абдулла Ал Гергави мырзага салттуу жылуу меймандостукка жана дүйнөлүк өкмөттүк саммитти мыкты уюштургандыгы үчүн ыраазычылык билдиргим келет. Бул саммит адамзатты тынчсыздандырган маселелерди талкуулоо үчүн уникалдуу аянтча катары кызмат кылат. Ушул калыптанып жаткан глобалдык таасири темасына арналган сессияда сөз сүйлөө мен үчүн чоң сыймык. Биз фундаменталдуу өзгөрүүлөрдүн жана башкаруунун салттуу механизмдеринин кыйроо доорунда жашап жатабыз. Мурда глобалдык таасир аймак, калк, ресурстар жана аскердик күч менен аныкталса, бүгүнкү күндө бул факторлор экинчи планга өтүп баратат. Заманбап дүйнөнү технологиялар, экономикалык тармактар, маалымат агымдар жана ой жүгүртүү стандарттар калыптандырууда. Маселе ресурстарда ээлик кылгандарда эмес, аларды пайдалануунун эрежелерин аныктагандар, экосистемаларды түзүп, стандарттарды белгилеп, келечекке стратегиялык көз карашты түзүүдө жатат. Глобалдык таасир мындан ары чек аралар жана ресурстар менен аныкталбай турганы белгилүү. Кылымдар бою бийликтин негизин жер, жаратылыш ресурстары, аскердин көлөмү жана экономикалык күч түзүп келген. Бирок бүгүнкү күндө бул көрүнүш тездик менен өзгөрүүдө. Учурдагы таасирдин лидерлери ири аймактарга жана ресурстарга ээлик кылгандар эмес, эл аралык стандарттарды түзүп, санариптик платформалар менен башкарып, дүйнөлүк тенденцияларды орноткондор болууда. Буга бир нече мисал келтиргим келет. Сингапур өзүнүн кичинекей аймагына карабастан Азиянын каржылык жана логистикалык борборуна айланып, эл аралык компанияларды өзүнө тартып, дүйнөлүк бизнес үчүн шарттарды түзүүдө. Эстония дүйнөдө биринчи болуп санариптик мамлекет концепциясын ишке ашырды. Бул ага технологиялык артыкчылык берип, эл аралык кызматташтыкка чыңдады. Дубай адамдарды, товарларды, каржыны жана идеяларды бириктирген экономикалык системаны куруп, ири өлкөлөрдүн экономикасы гана түзө ала турган таасирдүү эл аралык борборго айланды. Бүгүн глобалдык таасир чек ара жана ресурстар менен аныкталбай калган кезде биз бийликтин табиятын кайра карап чыгышыбыз керек. Ал азыркы учурда аймактарды толугу менен физикалык көзөмөлдөөгө көз каранды эмес. Тескерисинче санариптик, экономикалык жана маалыматтык аянттарда калыптанууда. 21-кылымда бийлик аймактарга жана ресурстарга ээ болуу менен аныкталбайт. Ал технологиялар жана глобалдык таасирдин инфратүзүмдөрүн түзгөндөргө таандык. Урматтуу айымдар жана мырзалар, азыр глобалдык таасирди ким калыптандырат? Мамлекеттерби же экосистемаларбы? Мамлекеттер глобалдык саясаттын негизги акторлору бойдон калууда. Бирок алар бүгүн жаңы реалдуулукка иш алып барууда. Салттуу бийлик инструменттеринен тышкары, биз азыр глобалдык технология платформаларынын, экосистемалардын жана корпоративдик альянстардын таасирин эске алышыбыз керек. Бүгүнкү күндө биз корпорацияларды, технологиялык платформаларды, эл аралык каржы институттарын жана санариптик тармактарды камтыган таасирдин жаңы экосистемаларын көрүп жатабыз. Бул кантип байкалат? Google жана OpenAI эмгек рыногун билим берүү жана бизнести өзгөрткөн жасалма интеллекти жаратууда. Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, миллиондогон компаниялар жана колдонуучулар көз каранды болгон санариптик экономиканын инфраструктурасын калыптандырат. TikTok жана Netflix дүйнө жүзү боюнча коомдук пикирге таасир этип, маалымат тенденцияларын жана маданий артыкчылыктарды аныктоодо. Бул жаңы тартиптин катарына кире алгандар олуттуу стратегиялык артыкчылыктарга ээ болушат. Глобалдык экосистемага икемдүү түрдө интеграцияланган, атаандаштыкка жөндөмдүү улуттук платформаларды түзүп, эл аралык альянстарды түзө алган мамлекеттер стратегиялык артыкчылыкка ээ болот. Урматтуу саммиттин катышуучулары, экономикалык таасир бүгүн сооданын жана өнөр жай кубаттуулугунун салттуу моделдеринин чегинен чыгууда. Дүйнө санариптик транзакцияларга, глобалдык каржы платформаларына жана тармактык бизнес экосистемаларына карай жылып жатат. Бул мамлекеттердин икемдүү болушун жана өз ара аракеттенүүнүн жаңы моделдерин түз алышын талап кылат. Экономиканын таасири кандай өзгөрүүдө? Санариптик төлөм платформаларынын жана альтернативдүү каржы системаларынын өнүгүшү эл аралык транзакцияларды өзгөртүүдө. жаңы экономикалык союздардын түзүлүшү өлкөлөр менен региондордун өз ара көз карандылыгын жогорулатат. Компаниялар технологияны, логистиканы жана каржыны айкалыштырган глобалдык бизнес экосистемаларын түзүп жатышат. Ошентип мамлекеттер принципиалдуу жаңы реалдуулукка туш болушууда. Алардын ролу ресурстарды жана аймакты башкаруу менен гана чектелбейт. Эми алардын таасири глобалдык өзгөрүүлөргө ыңгайлашып, өз жарандары үчүн актуалдуу жана пайдалуу бойдон калууда. Глобалдык процесстерге интеграциялоо үчүн шарттарды түзүү жөндөмдүүлүгүнө жараша болот. Өкмөттөр азыркы доор бул маанилердин, технологиялардын жана түйүндөрдүн атаандаштык доор экенин аңдап билгенде, жөн гана турбастан лидерлерге айлана алышат. Баалуу адамдык капиталга, динамикалуу жаштарга жана демилгелерин жигерди өнүктүрүүгө дарамети бар болгон өлкө Кыргыз Республикасы сыяктуу кичинекей мамлекеттер да бул дүйнөлүк тенденцияларды өз позицияларын бекемдөө үчүн пайдалана алышат. Кыргызстан өз өнүгүү жолунда Борбор Азия чөлкөмүнүн чок ортосунда жайгашкан, деңизге чыга албаган өлкө катары гидроэнергетикалык потенциалдарды жогорулатууга, транзиттик мүмкүнчүлүктөрдү ачууга жана мамлекеттик башкарууну санариптештирүүгө басым жасоодо. Анткени Кыргызстан региондогу суу башындагы өлкө болуп саналат. Анын географиялык жайгашуусу суу күн тартибин түзгөнгө шарт түзөт. Жалпы ГЭС аркылуу энергия өндүрүүнүн потенциалы жылына 140 миллиард киловаттан ашык. Суу ресурстары өлкөнүн керектөөлөрүн канааттандырат жана ошондой эле агымдын ылдый жагында жайгашкан Борбор Азия өлкөлөрүнүн кеңири аймактары үчүн негизги суу булагы болуп саналат. Жыл сайын 5,6 миллиард киловатт саат электр энергиясын өндүрүүнү камсыз кыла ала турган Кыргызстандын Камбар-Ата ГЭС-1 улуттук долбоорун куруу негизги артыкчылык болуп саналат. Бул ички муктаждыкты чечүүгө гана эмес, ашыкча таза энергияны чөлкөмдөгү өлкөлөргө экспорттоого мүмкүндүк берет. Экинчи мега долбоор Кытай, Кыргызстан, Өзбекстан темир жолунун курулушу. Бул долбоордун практикалык ишке ашуусу өткөн жылдын декабрь айында Кыргыз Республикасынын президенти урматтуу Садыр Нуркожоевич Жапаровдун катышуусунда башталган. Белгилей кетсек, бул долбоор жөн эле транспорт коридору эмес, чыгыш менен батыш өлкөлөрүн бириктире турган маанилүү стратегиялык көпүрө. Бул каттам Кытайдан Кыргызстанга, ошондой эле Борбор Азия жана жакынкы чыгыш өлкөлөрүнө, анын ичинде Туркияга, андан ары Европа биримдигине товарларды жеткирүүнү камсыздайт. Долбоор аймактар аралык байланыштарды чыңдап, транспорттук каттамдарды диверсификациялоого жана Борбор Азия өлкөлөрүнүн максаттарына шайкеш келген эл аралык транспорттук транзиттик борбор катары аймактын атаандаштыкка жөндөмдүүлүгүн жогорулатууга жардам берет. Мен айткан үчүнчү бакыт санариптик трансформация. Анын негизги максаты бюрократияны жана мамлекеттик кызмат көрсөтүүлөрдүн чыгымдарын азайтуу аркылуу жарандарыбыздын жана ишкерлерибиздин жашоосун жеңилдетүү. Бүгүн биз санариптик трансформация, жасалма интеллект жана маалыматтарды жөн гана курал эмес, маалыматтык жана стратегиялык ойлонулган чечимдерди кабыл алуу үчүн негиз болуп жаткан мамлекеттик башкаруунун жаңы доорунун босогосунда турабыз. Жасалма интеллект өкмөттөргө башкарууну жакшыртуу үчүн болуп көрбөгөндөй мүмкүнчүлүктөрдү түзүүдө. Бүгүнкү күндө дүйнөдө чечимдер миллиарддаган маалыматтардын объективдүү анализин негизинде кабыл алынууда. Эгерде биз фискалдык реформалардын, энергетикалык тарифтердин өзгөрүшүн же инвестициялык программалардын ишке киришинин таасирин алдын ала баалай алсак, бул бизге тобокелдиктерди минималдаштырууга, экономиканын туруктуулугун жогорулатууга жана чыныгы тең салмактуу натыйжалуу чечимдерди кабыл алууга мүмкүндүк берет. Биз эл аралык өнөктөштөрүбүздүн тажрыйбасын жана билимин өздөштүрүүгө даярбыз. Кымбаттуу достор, бүгүнкү күндө дүйнөлүк таасир мамлекеттерге гана эмес, бардык үчүн жеткиликтүү болуп берүүдө. Компаниялар, стартаптар жана түгөл жеке адамдар инновациялык чечимдерди сунуштоо, алдыңкы технологияларды иштеп чыгуу жана жаңы маңыздарды түзүү аркылуу дүйнөлүк аренадан атын чыгара алышат. Бүгүнкү күндө глобалдык таасир саясат жана экономика гана эмес, тескерисинче идеяларды калыптандыруудагы ой-пикир жана баалуулуктарды жаратууга жөндөм болуп саналат. Жаңы пайда болуп жаткан глобалдык таасир мындан ары чоң державаларга, күчтүү альянстарга, корпорацияларга же компанияларга гана таандык эмес. Реалдуулукту өзгөртүүчү идеяны сунуш кыла алган ар бир инсан үчүн жеткиликтүү болуп калды. Мына ушундан улам 21-кылым маңыздардын технологиялардын жана идеялардын атандашуу заманы. Көңүл бурганыңыздар үчүн чоң рахмат.
Thank you, Excellency, for a wide-ranging discussion. I must also acknowledge the presence of the ministers from UAE who are here, including the Foreign Minister, who has an excellent ties with our Foreign Minister, Dr. Subramaniam Jaishankar, who is supposed to be here, but is traveling with the Prime Minister of India. Now we have Nobel laureate, Professor James Robinson, who needs no introduction. He was a Nobel laureate last year in economics, and as a political scientist, extensively worked on Africa, on other countries, including Haiti, had experience and how nations succeed and how nations fail is probably his specialization, and there is no better person to discuss these. He's going to talk about the weight of history, and we are eagerly waiting for him. Thank you, Professor Robinson.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, and I'm very delighted to be here today. Do I have to press something, or is it going to magically emerge? I have some slides. Anyway, so why emergent? The emphasis on emergent. I could press this, see what happens. Oh, there it is. Okay, all right. I did have to press something after all. Okay, so this session is about emergence and emergent futures and emergent leaders. Why the discussion of emergence? Because many societies in the world, economically and politically, are hamstrung in a sense by their past. And so a lot of the research that Daron Ashimolu and Simon Johnson and I did, for which we received the Nobel Prize, was about this legacy of the past. And I want to just emphasize two aspects of the research for which we won the Nobel Prize. One is the connection between institutions and prosperity, in particular what we call inclusive institutions and prosperity. And the second point I'm going to emphasize, which is important for thinking about this issue of the weight of the past or the burden of history, is how history has shaped the distribution of institutions and prosperity in the world today. Okay? So the first part, why are inclusive institutions so important for understanding the prosperity of society? I always like to illustrate this, so I'll come back to the light bulb theme. I like to illustrate this with the patent, Thomas Edison's patent for a light bulb. So Thomas Edison, the great 19th century innovator, he invented the light bulb, and after he came up with the light bulb, he took out a patent. So a patent is a very interesting economic institution. It's something which protects your intellectual property rights. So economists have known since the work of Robert Solow in the 1950s that what drives economic development is innovation. It's new technologies, new ideas, new ways of raising productivity. Okay? So when you come up with an idea, that's something which is very easy for other people to borrow, to take, to use. A patent is something which is meant to protect your intellectual property rights, that's meant to create incentives for innovation. Okay? And so the patent is very important as a tool for raising innovation and technological change. But it also has a particular property which is connected to this word inclusion. So who was Thomas Edison, for example? He was homeschooled. His father was a roofing contractor. He wasn't an elite. He didn't grow up wealthy. He was just a man with a lot of energy and creativity, a lot of ideas, a lot of drive. If you look at people like Edison, who took out patents in 19th century United States, when the United States became the world technology leader, you see something very similar. You see people who come from all over the social spectrum. Talent, ideas, creativity, it's spread out everywhere in society. You don't know who those people are who have that. So what you need to do is to create a set of rules, a set of institutions that allows all that talent to come to the top. And that's what the patent system did. The patent system, you could file a patent, there was a board, it evaluated your innovation, everyone could pay the same fee, and the state enforced your intellectual property rights. So it was inclusive, it was an inclusive institution in a particular sense of it created very broad-based opportunities and incentives. Okay? So we know inclusive institutions are associated with prosperity. Why doesn't the whole world have inclusive institutions and prosperity? Well, that's where history comes in. So one of the things we showed in our work is that if you look at variation in institutions in the world, it's heavily associated with historical events, in particular European colonialism. So I don't want to go into details of these figures, but in our work we emphasized a lot. Within the colonial world, you see very different societies with very different types of institutions emerging, depending on the circumstances that Europeans faced. And in particular, in places with very high disease burdens for Europeans, Europeans couldn't settle, and it was very unlikely to have inclusive institutions in those societies. So here, I separate the former colonial world into red, blue, and green, and think of green countries as places that were healthy for Europeans to live in. Red were places that were extremely unhealthy, and green is somewhere in the middle. On the different axes here, there are different measures of institutions today. Corruption, rule of law, and accountability, an average of different indices, the rule of law from the World Bank. It doesn't really matter how you measure this. Countries which historically, hundreds of years ago, had very bad disease environments for Europeans systematically have worse institutions today. And that's because of the way colonial societies formed in those places. Okay? That doesn't matter for institutions. Here's just institutions. Here's the connection to prosperity. You find the same thing. Places with high levels of mortality, such as Mali or Nigeria, tend to be much poorer today than places in the former colonial world, like the United States, which historically had much more benign disease environments for Europeans. Okay, so here's the weight of history. You know, how come that persists? How do we know it persists? Well, you know, we can just look at that data over time. So if I separate the world into high, medium, and low mortality for Europeans, and I just measure one way, institutions in one way, kind of putting together corruption, rule of law, accountability, you can see for the last 120 years, there's been this distribution. Places which were healthy for Europeans in the colonial period have much better institutions, and that's been like that for a long time. And you see these things are just very persistent over time. Okay? So, yes, history has shaped the distribution of institutions in the world today and the prosperity in the world today. Why does that happen? Well, because institutions create incentives. They create opportunities. They reproduce themselves because people's decisions are shaped by those incentives. I could give lots of examples of this. I was going to give one example, which disappeared from the slide. No, here it is, which is how the United States in the 19th century and Latin American countries dealt with distributing frontier land. Okay? In the United States, they passed something called the Homestead Act. This is application number 1. This is the first person, Daniel Friedman, who applied for 160 acres of land in Nebraska under the Homestead Act. Okay, he applied for the land, he was given 160 acres, and he got this beautiful title, you see, it has all of the details of exactly where his plot of land in Nebraska was. So in the 19th century, countries all over the Americas had to face this problem of dividing frontier land. The United States divided it in this very equal way. Why did they do that? Because the society was sufficiently democratic that frontier land had to be opened up for everybody. If you contrast that with Latin America, in Latin America, frontier land was divided between politically connected elites in a kind of oligarchic land grab. Okay? So in both cases, the initial institutions create incentives to allocate land in particular ways, and the outcome of that reproduces the circumstances that gave rise to it. Okay, so that's why institutions persist. Institutions persist because they create particular incentives. Okay? So that's why history matters. But I think once you start thinking about, these are facts, but not every country fits into that pattern. And history may create incentives and opportunities, and people make choices as a consequence of that, but people can make different choices. People don't have to take the choices that reproduce the past. So I think history is not destiny, and that's the second point I want to make. Here's a great example. Deng Xiaoping famously said, "Poverty is not socialism. To be rich is glorious." Okay? So here's someone who made decisions about how to organize this society that didn't reproduce the past at all. And my point here is he didn't have to do that. Coming back to the theme of light bulbs, here is the Korean Peninsula at night, and I want to point out the difference not just between South Korea and North Korea, but North Korea and China. Okay? So Deng Xiaoping could have reproduced the communist model in China in the same way they have done in North Korea, and kept China poor. There was nothing inevitable about what he did. He just decided to do something different. Okay? So there's an example of people making choices. Here's an African example that I like very much. I work a lot in sub-Saharan Africa. Here's on the right in the suit is Seretse Khama. So Seretse Khama, the first president of Botswana, an independent. Here he is with Harry Oppenheimer, the head of De Beers diamond mining company, at the opening of the Orapa diamond mine. What did Seretse Khama do? Seretse Khama persuaded the Ngwato people to change the law, to take the diamonds, and instead of the diamonds being the possession of the Ngwato people, the Orapa diamond mine was in Ngwato land, to change the law so the diamond money accrued to the state. Instead of the diamonds accruing to the tribe, the diamonds accrued to the state. Okay? So that was a remarkable decision that changed the trajectory of Botswana. He didn't have to do that, but he decided that this was in the interest of the country. Okay? So history is not destiny because you can make different choices. But I think it's actually even more interesting than that. Because if you start thinking about these cases, you see history is not a kind of burden that you escape from by making different choices. It's also opportunities. History presents opportunities. And in fact, most of these successful experience of transitions involve leveraging history in constructive ways. Okay? Back to Seretse Khama. Okay, I mentioned Seretse Khama. Here he is in 1949. I didn't tell you something else about Seretse Khama. Seretse Khama was actually the traditional chief of the Ngwato people. He was a Hosi. He was the chief. Okay? So the chief persuaded his tribesmen to take the diamonds and vest them in the state. Okay? So it was his legitimacy that allowed that to happen. Here he is addressing a khotla, which is the traditional tribal assembly in 1949, bringing his Ngwato people along with his plan to change the country. Okay? I think many examples are similar to that. Here's, in the middle of this is President Paul Kagame of Rwanda. How does President Kagame get Rwanda to move so dramatically? Yes, there's huge burdens of history in Rwanda, but he leverages history to change the society. So the largest policy implementation program in Rwanda is called Imihigo. Imihigo is a pre-colonial social norm about making promises to deliver, to achieve something. And if you don't achieve it, you're humiliated. It brings social sanctions and ostracism. So he took that, starting in 2006, that traditional practice, because that resonates in Rwandan society, and he built that into an enormous policy implementation scheme. Okay? So that's using history. It's leveraging history to change the future. Okay? You know, how do I know that works? You know, here's some data from the recent data from the World Bank looking at the application of Imihigo to rural electrification in Rwanda. So President Kagame and the government have used that to spread electricity throughout rural Rwanda in a way, you know, in a dramatic kind of transformation. All right, just some data. Okay, another example, closer to UAE, with a lot of involvement by the UAE, interestingly enough, Somaliland. Somaliland, the Republic of, you know, the former British colony of Somalia, Somaliland in the north of Somalia, which became de facto independent 24 years ago, spent 10 years rewriting and structuring its institutions to build a state. How did it do that? It did it in its cultural context. It created a legislative body that represented clans within the state. So using the past to kind of build institutions in a novel way. Okay? So I think if you start thinking about it, many of these transitions use the past as an opportunity. Think about the Meiji Restoration in 19th century Japan, one of the most successful experiences of transition to kind of modern economic growth, modern institutions. The Meiji Restoration, it built the transition on restoring the emperor and recreating many of the norms around the emperor. Okay? So this using the past, for me, seems to be key for kind of building a political project, making it legitimate, and getting people to move along with it. Okay? I would say, you know, the words that many people would use about what Deng Xiaoping did or what Soretsi Karma did, you could think of many other examples, would be agency. People in business schools talk about agency. Okay? We don't have good social science theories about agency. You know, social science is all about structures. So we look at the environment in which people make these decisions, and we try to think about what, you know, why did Soretsi Karma do what he did? Okay? And I think, you know, there's two facilitating factors, you could say. You know, one we understand much better than the other. The thing we understand much better is, I showed you a picture of him in front of the khotla, the traditional assembly. Okay, so situations, fora of accountability, of deliberation. The khotla is not like the British Parliament. You know, people don't stand up and vote and 51 in favor, 50. No, that's not how things work in Africa. It's a consensus, deliberation, discussion. It's a very different, but it's a fora of accountability and deliberation, you can say. You can think that encourages agency in the collective welfare. The other aspect, which is much less well understood, is something to do with political culture. What is it about the political culture that encourages agency in the collective interest? You know, in the case of China, you could say, you know, going back to the Zhou period in ancient China, there's this notion of the mandate of heaven. You know, rulers have the mandate of heaven, and if you don't act in the collective good, you lose the mandate of heaven. So there's a deep political culture associated with leaders acting in the public welfare, okay? Of course, the interesting thing about Western social science is Western social science heavily emphasizes, two, this sort of notion of institutions, of political institutions, and has much less to say about one, meaning a culture of rulership or a culture of a political culture which tends to get leaders to act in the collective interest. There's much less said about that in Western social science, but I don't know if you've been following the news like I have in the United States. I'm a little worried that we may have underemphasized number one. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Brilliant. Yep. Please. Yep. Yep. So, I think I'll sit here. So it's better. Sure, sure.
So, without much ado, I'll just go straight away because we're really, a bit, tight on the time, and we have really exciting kind of topics to be covered. Thank you, Professor, for the brilliant presentation. We are now from an economic journey, we're now going to get into geopolitics and some geoeconomics. So I start with Lara Burrow, the CEO of the Economist Group. You know, we are in the first few weeks of the Trump 2.0. What do you think, what would his 4-year term look like? He seems to be on a mission. So how do you think this is going to shape in the next year and the coming years?
Well, hello, everybody. Great to be here. Marhaba. I think we would all like to know what this will look like in 4 years. I've had trouble keeping up with what's happened in the last 20 days. I think he's signed now 60 executive orders in the first 20 days. That's more than Biden signed in the first 100 days. He's trampled all over the US, Mexico, Canada agreement. He has threatened the sovereignty of nations. He has made some jaw-dropping comments about Gaza, and so the list goes on. So just extrapolating from that, I think one of the sort of observations, and I'll go back to a comment that Chrystia Friedland made in an article she wrote to The Economist only a couple of weeks ago, is uncertainty is a feature, not a bug, of the Trump administration. So one of the things we can continue to expect is uncertainty. And those people who say he's a negotiator and this is all a tactical ploy, he is just frightening the world so that we end up somewhere which is a reasonable compromise, I worry that really what he's doing is drawing down on American capital that has been built over almost a century. And that is both moral capital, diplomatic capital, human capital. And so it is going to be interesting to see what happens as sort of the world order we've been used to is shaken up. I think the role of government is to create certainty and stability for its citizens, for businesses, for investment. And it is very hard to see how we do that in the current environment.
So as a follow-up to that, Mr. Frederick, you may have some different views, right? On a positive of Trump 2.0. You think that there is a positive impact on the geopolitics of Trump 2.0 because
there were certain things which were set after World War II by the US globally, and probably he's trying to shake those up, including drawing down on some of the aid programs, right? How do you think, I mean, overall, it will have a positive impact of Trump's geopolitical outreach?
So, first, it's important to say that what's in this one man's mind and the decisions he takes could have massive consequences. So let's lay out the global context first, which would have been the same if President Kamala Harris had been elected or if President Trump had been elected. And the global context is a war in Europe. It's the most dangerous moment probably geopolitically in our lifetimes, 2025. You have an intractable war in Europe. You have a ceasefire in the Middle East and some return of hostages, but the tensions are there and they persist. You have tensions with Asia, and you have a contest for the commanding heights of technological change, artificial intelligence. And artificial intelligence is going to be very promising in many respects, but very disruptive in many respects. So a traditional way of looking at geopolitics at this very challenging moment is as a multi-dimensional chessboard for grand masters and great powers to shape things over generations. Donald Trump has tipped over the board, has introduced a new game with different pieces, and he's in a hurry. If you're an optimist, and I've been talking to people around the World Government Summit, and the optimists say we have a chance for global deconfliction that's urgently needed, that he can reach new arrangements with Russia and Ukraine that could bring that war to an end, and potentially create the situation for a sovereign, independent Ukraine, a more secure Ukraine anchored in the West, potentially. These are the optimists. The optimists believe in the Middle East, a new way of thinking could build upon the Abraham Accords. And let's not forget the Abraham Accords were a creation of the first Trump administration. A willingness to look at a region in the new way, working very closely, obviously, with the UAE and with others. And one could build on that to get Saudi normalization with Israel, a new arrangement with the United States between the Saudis that would be a huge breakthrough. And then with China, he could also bring this situation into a new arrangement. So that's the optimists. By looking at things in a new way, by being transactional, non-ideological, pragmatic, and ambitious, he could shift all of this. The pessimists look at what you were talking about, which is second-order effects of too many tariffs, second-order effects of not taking your partnerships and your allies seriously enough. If you empty Gaza, what does that do to Jordan and to Egypt in terms of refugee flows? And so you have both sides happening, but what one has to understand is this man comes into a situation where the world anyway is in a very precarious, but also potentially promising situation, and he's going to have a very big impact. I am more optimistic. One shouldn't forget that the United States has more than 25% of GDP, 27, 28% of GDP, but 70% of equity investments. It still is a place people want to send their children to school. It still is a place where people are sending billions and billions of dollars of investment, particularly around artificial intelligence. But what's true is our allies and our partners want consistency. And they don't just worry about the Trump administration in that respect. They also have seen through the Obama administration and through into the first Trump administration and through into the Biden administration, particularly in this region, they haven't been getting sufficient consistency of purpose from the United States.
As a follow-up, Mr. Kemp, I mean, you know, the biggest challenge, geopolitical challenge, the geoeconomic challenge that the US is facing currently, irrespective of who is the president, is from People's Republic of China. I mean, there are some signals, and these are very nascent, and I also am very curious to understand. Do you think that he could reach a deal with China? Somebody as some people are mentioning, that raise the tariff, in 6 months, reach a deal.
Well, I had a conversation with someone close to President Trump, and he pointed first to the 60% tariff threat, which then was removed. Right. It's now a 10% tariff. The Chinese have responded calmly to that. He, through executive order, stopped the ban on TikTok for a 75-day review, so that gave that a breather. And so this person said, well, could it be Trump to China like Nixon to China? And he said, well, he likes making deals with big, powerful leaders around the world, and so he would rather make a deal with China than go to war with China. And so that's what he's going to try, and he'll try to make a deal through a mixture of carrots and sticks. And I said, well, who will be Kissinger? And he said, well, Elon Musk would like to be Kissinger. and you can laugh at that, but if you actually look at Musk's connections in China, they're deep, they're profound. And if there's anyone in the Trump circle, and the United States, there's bipartisan consensus on very little in our country, but in terms of being anti-communist China, there's a bipartisan consensus. But I think Musk, with his Tesla plant, with other business interests in China, has really been very forward-leaning in creating better relations with China. And so I think you're certainly going to see a testing of the waters and a potential for better relations, although I would say right now, on both sides, the situation is fraught. And President Xi Jinping has a vote on this as well. And his actions in the last few years in the region and in the building up of his military are not entirely promising at the moment.
Right. Laura, if I can come to you, on China, the DeepSeek has taken the world by storm, right? I mean, it's just, the stock in the U.S. stock market, the Dow just fell. I mean, what does it mean for the U.S. leadership of artificial intelligence? And we are talking about this on a day when this artificial intelligence summit is being held in Paris, co-chaired by India and France, where they're trying to look at, a middle path. Neither an U.S. model nor a China-led model. So what does it mean for the U.S. leadership on the artificial intelligence, the DeepSeek in particular? It's a Sputnik moment, as many say.
Yeah, well, look, I think we've all recognized that AI is going to be a fantastic opportunity, but also comes with the need for governments and society to rethink our rules. The question is whether you want something that powerful to sit in the hands of any country, right? And it is, I think, healthy to have a number of versions of AI, although I'm sure some people would dispute that. And I think competition is generally a good thing, and as we have seen with DeepSeek, it is the fact that China had to create something under more difficult circumstances that led it to create a model which is more efficient. You can then argue about how it was created and where the IP came from, but I would argue you could argue about that in the core models. The question, I think, that was really interested in the plenary session this morning with Mr. Lee from Baidu is the discussion around where will returns flow, right? At the moment, as he's described, all the returns flow to the chip makers, to the infrastructure providers, and there's very little to show for it on the application layer. With a model like DeepSeek, with completely different economics, the question is whether businesses and governments could apply those models with different economics to solve big societal problems and indeed small business problems, and whether that actually, in fact, is a positive thing for the world as a whole. So more competition, more variation, less concentration of power, in my view, is probably healthier for how this develops. It's an incredibly powerful technology, and you probably don't want just one person running it.
So, would you say this would be a Manhattan Project for steroids?
Yeah, Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor for President Biden, in an interview he did with Axios, said this race for the commanding heights of artificial intelligence would make the Manhattan Project look like a small thing. But that makes it sound like more of a physics problem, which was the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project obviously created a nuclear weapon, and you can imagine how the world would have been different if the Third Reich had got there first. And so on the one hand, you want to get to the commanding heights. On the other hand, it's collaborative. Tens of billions of dollars are being invested by the UAE and others in artificial intelligence with US partners. The G42 Microsoft partnership is a great model of things going forward. But the difference between Manhattan Project and artificial intelligence is at that point things were coming from the government, and then and also the internet was a project that then went to the private sector. The breakthroughs in artificial intelligence are coming from the private sector, right. And then the government has to figure out what are the consequences of that. I think what we have to understand is it's one of the most disruptive, promising, and perilous technologies the world has ever seen. And so government will have to intervene and set standards and ensure that we tap this for the best outcomes and then prevent the worst outcomes. We've learned through the internet that a digital divide can make richer people richer and poorer people poorer. And the question is, have we learned enough so that the benefits of artificial intelligence can be more equally spread? Because if they are, then the dissemination of education, of healthcare, of so many other good things could be accelerated. But on the other hand, there's also dark sides that can be accelerated as well. So I think we're in. I always tell my friends, if in the next 4 years, everyone seems to be talking about President Trump, but artificial intelligence is going to have a hell of a lot more impact on where the world is 4 years from now than Donald Trump will have.
Thank you. One quick last, Laura, what do you think is Global South heading among this competition between two big powers?
Well, look, I think it's undisputable that the Global South is going to become more important. I think the latest stat is 18% of the world GDP concentrated in 133 countries, but 30% of trade and 62% of the population. So the one undisputable thing is that trade between the Global South, the importance of the Global South is only going to rise. There's probably too little being spoken at this conference and everywhere else about that, and so I think I'm optimistic. If you're sitting in the Global South, the future is probably looking quite bright.
Thank you. I'm afraid we have run out of time. It was a brilliant session, and to discuss President Trump and China, I think even 3 days are not enough. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I'll see you sometime in India, probably?
Yes, let's be in contact.
That's right.
The process of launching a global India hub.
Okay.
So I'd like to talk to you about
Oh, absolutely. So I'll directly mail you?
Sorry?
We are now coming into the real, blockbuster ministerial sessions. And the title of this is, Will Economic Alliances Drive the Future of Global Influence? And to discuss this, we have two very interesting and knowledgeable personalities. His Excellency Pedro Reis, the Minister of Economy of Portugal. Welcome. And to be joined by him from the host, Dr. Thani Al-Zaudi, the Minister of State for Foreign Trade, Ministry of Economy. Thank you, Dr. Zaidi. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, Dr. Zaidi. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So we start with you. I know Europe have an inflection point in this turmoil of, and the new presidency in US and everybody is, whether Europe will be dumped by US or not is just the refrain in the letters. So what do you think the regional partnerships and economic coalitions play in reshaping global trade dynamics and how they can be used to address shared challenges? We today have shared challenges all over the world.
Thank you. Good morning, dear friends. Basically, I think that Europe is on the crossroads. All this volatility in the world might work as a wake-up call also for Europe. And that's interesting because it can speed up the reforms we are conscious we have to implement. The way I see it is basically we have a lot of complexity on the world level, so the challenges are huge and cannot be approached by a single region. And that's go without saying by a single country. There's a sense of urgency that's positive for change, because the name of the game we are facing is change, whether one way or another. And there's a perception of multi-dependency. Now, and all these convenes into historic times. There's a change of cycle, even for mankind and for economies and for governments. And we can either go two ways. One is the direction, the avenue of, if you want, fragmentation, transactional approach, and you'll enter into a reciprocity deal. The other way, which I believe it's the best case and it's positive for Europe, is either if you go for collaborative, but it calls for creativity and for bold reforms. And just ending up these initial remarks, in Europe, it's all about deregulation. Mm-hmm. It's all about getting back to basics or where and from where you extract sustainable growth. And you extract sustainable growth through innovation, through scale, through agility, through less bureaucracy, through less taxes,